Hey everybody, so show's not quite ready to begin. There it is, that timer there, that's the countdown. You can scrub ahead of there, or even better, if there's something popping up right here, right now, then that's the finished, edited one that you want to watch. But if there's nothing there, then just scrub to the beginning of this timer, wherever it is, and that'll be the show you want to watch. All right, see you in a few minutes. Hello, everybody. Apparently, it's time to start a show. Ryan, once you get that recording going on the audio, we're going to need that for part of the pre-show today. How's everybody doing? How y'all doing today? Hopefully well. Hopefully you guys are all excited after yesterday's big announcement. We'll be doing a Q&A after today's show as always, and something tells me there's going to be some questions about that. No problem. Bring them on. That'll be fun. Couple things before we start the show itself. Oh, I wanted to show you this. I wanted to share. This is today on the sharing circle. Remember I showed you some pictures a while ago. I talked about doing a commercial shoot for a East Coast-based magazine, wood shop news. It's a local big wood shop. Anyway, it's out. So if you're into big woodworking, grab the Woodshop News September 2018 edition. I have absolutely no idea if this is something you can get on newsstands or if it's just an industry rag, but somewhere in here there are all of my pictures. They're excited. Look at that. Here we go. No, not that. That's the catalog. But look, double page, double truck there, 2-page spread, and then a bunch more in there, a bunch of the pictures. It's all very exciting. It's always nice to see your stuff in print. No matter how much they say print is dead, it is still awesome to see your stuff in print. Wouldn't you agree? I agree. Of course, I said it, so I would hope I agree, but there you go. Okay, let's see here. Next thing we're going to do before we start the actual show is give away this bag. You may recall that last week we did a giveaway thing, and now we're going to draw the winner. So actually, I'm going to cut this piece into a separate video and upload it separately, so let me do a quick clean start on that, and then we'll do it. Hey folks, remember last week I said I was going to give away my old bag here. This is the Think Tank Retrospective 7 version 1. I got the version 2 video. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, click up here and watch the version 2 video. In that video, I said I would give this one away. It was going to be a random drawing based off of comments. All you had to do is comment on the first video, and then after the end of Monday, 1 week later, I would pull all those names and do a random draw. And we're going to do that random draw right now, here, live on the air. If you're watching this not live, well, then it already happened, but now you can find out if your name got drawn or not, if you won. So, let's see here. I've got this set up over here where we have a nice little split screen. On the left-hand side, I have all of the names of the commenters. I had to do this entirely by hand. I had to copy the entire list of comments, paste them into a spreadsheet, delete all the actual comments, and leave just the names themselves. I then sorted them alphabetically so I can make sure that there were no duplicates. There were not. Very good. Thank you, people, for not trying to enter your name 500 times. And here are the names. So if you entered, you should have seen your name scroll by there. We had a total of 80. Over here, I'm using a website called randomnumbergenerator.com. Generate a number between 1 and 80. We're going to punch that in there. And as soon as I click this button, we're going to have a winner. So we get a drum roll. Somebody do a drum roll out there. Hit the drum papers. Hit the drums. Hit the drums. What are we going to get? The number is 21. 21 is the winner, and number 21 is Dean Condon or Condon. Dean, if you are watching live, let me know. Let's get the right thing up on screen. If you are watching live, let me know. We will give you a big shout out there. And if you're not watching live, don't worry about it. We'll track you down one way or another and get this thing sent out to you. So wherever in the world you might be, my friend, this is your bag. Congratulations. The super cool thing is when I told Think Tank that I was doing this, they said, hey, we're on board for more of these. So I will be able to do more giveaways in the future with new Think Tank bags. I'm not going to tell you what or how or when yet, but it will happen, so stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell so you know about these things. But that is going to be something we'll be able to do in the future, which I'm excited about. So see you in a little bit. See you for the next show. See you later. Bye-bye. Okay, so there we go. Congratulations, Dean. Dean, if you're watching, I haven't seen your name scroll by yet, but Dean, very good. Congratulations. Super cool to you. All right, let's get rid of this, get this out of the way, and let us have a show. Give me one moment here. I'm suddenly realizing how thirsty I am, and I think hopefully this water hasn't been here for a month. Fresh as if it was poured last year. Okay, get this screen set up for the proper show. That is in place. I'm going to actually get rid of this. Let me swap out a cable here. We're going to be doing a live outside presentation today, so I got to make sure everything is all queued up and ready properly. There we go. That camera's in place. And let me just give me 1 second here. Actually, I can just do it here. Let me just make super sure that camera is in place. That is in place. I'm seeing the information I need on there. Yes, I am. Excellent. Superb. We are ready to go. You guys ready? We're recording. We're ready. Let's have a show, shall we? Right. Ryan's laughing at something. I have no idea what, but that's okay. All right. Yeah, let's do this. That's really quiet. All right, let's. Oh, Ryan, see, Ryan. Sorry. All right, the joke just totally flopped because the volume was down. Why is the volume low down? Oh, you know what? I'll bet that level isn't. No, it is up. Huh? Why is that so low? So much for that theory. All right, let me try this again.
I'm George.
It kind of works there. It's a good joke. Just give me a minute. Let me get the joke working. I don't know why that's.
George McFly. I'm your density.
Okay, I guess we'll just have to do it like that. That's okay. All right, let's try this one more time. So much for a good gag. Goodness gracious me. All right, let's wait for this thing to. What are you gonna do?
I'm George. George McFly. I'm your density.
Density, neutral density filters. That's what we're talking about today. The ND filter for your camera, why you need it, what it does, how it works, and basically, yeah, this is one of those things you're going to want to have. Good morning and welcome to PhotoJoseph's Photo Moment, the first live 3 times a week show here at youtube.com/PhotoJoseph every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, talking about all sorts of things, photography, video, live streaming related. And hey, on the timing, it's usually 9:30, but every once in a while we do an afternoon show just to try and get people on the other side of the world. So if you are watching this not live and you're thinking, man, I wish I could watch a live show every once in a while, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell because then you will get notified when we go live and it's in your time zone so you can actually check it out. So today we're talking about neutral density filters. What is an ND filter? So you see the word ND. ND stands for neutral density. You also see variable ND, and a variable ND is a neutral density filter that changes. It's quite exciting. So at its core, a neutral density filter, it reduces the amount of light, it restricts the amount of light coming into the camera. It's neutral. The neutral part of it is neutral, meaning it's not adding any color cast to it. Ideally. Now, I will say that lesser, inferior filters will tend to add a color cast, usually a little bit towards blue or a little bit towards brown. I've even seen them go towards green before. It's kind of awful. This is a kind of color correction that, in a pinch, it's probably okay. You can probably correct around it, especially if you do a custom white balance and then maybe do a little correction in post. But in general, you want to get your filters as neutral as possible. Neutral density filters can be quite expensive. They can be well over $100. Some of the bigger names like B&W make really, really, really good filters, but they're pretty spendy. The cool thing is that I've been working with some much lower cost filters and I've had zero problems with them. I'm not going to say they're as good. I'm not going to say there's no color cast, but I have not seen any issues with any of the cheaper filters that I've been using lately, including ones from, let's see, this one is a Fotga, F-O-T-G-A, Fotga, and this one I think is another brand, maybe just the same. This one, oh, this is also a Fotga. There you go. So 2 thumbs up to the Fotgas. We're going to link to these filters down below, but they've been really good to me. So let's go back to the basics. What is it? A neutral density filter restricts the amount of light coming through the lens reaching the sensor. Why does this matter? All right. Back up in a little photo 101 here. So when you think about the exposure is assembled of a trinity. You have 3 things that go into making your exposure. You have your ISO, you have your shutter speed, and you have your aperture. Any one of those can be controlled and adjusted to get the exposure that you need, an ideal exposure, correct exposure. So let's start with the ISO. ISO is generally one that we pretty much always want to keep as low as possible, right? We all know that the higher your ISO, the noisier or grainier the picture is going to be. So in general, we want our ISO to be as low as possible. If we're shooting outdoors in the full sun, this is an easy one. You're going to put the camera as low as it goes, or at least as low as is optimal, and you're going to be good to go. So this one is pretty easy. For outdoors shooting in the bright sun, you're going to keep it down. And incidentally, outdoor shooting in the bright sun is the kind of place where you're going to use one of these restricting the amount of light coming in. It's not really something you use indoors in a low light situation because you already don't have enough light. Okay, so the ISO part of the equation, this is easy. We keep it as low as possible. That's done. That's easy. All right, so then that leaves shutter speed and aperture. The shutter speed, we'll start with that. When you're shooting still photography, you can choose a shutter speed from, well, as low as you want, literally multiple seconds, up to as fast as your camera will do. Many cameras do 4 thousandths of a second, 8 thousandths of a second, 12 thousandths of a second, like ridiculously high numbers. And when you're shooting still photography, if you're doing something like a portrait or, I don't know, taking a picture of a scenic, it doesn't really matter too much. As long as things aren't moving in the scene, it doesn't really matter. So the difference between, say, a shot at 250th of a second versus one at 2 thousandths of a second, For the vast majority of type of photography, it really doesn't matter. If you're shooting sports, fast action, obviously you want that really fast shutter speed to freeze the action, great. If you want to have a little bit of motion blur, you gotta have a little bit slower shot, fine. But for the most part, if you're shooting at 250th, a 500th, a 1000s, a 2000s, yeah, for most pictures it's pretty much the same. Okay, so keep this in mind. Ryan is, okay, well then kill the Facebook feed. Are you guys getting an echo? Ryan's interrupted me. Okay, then kill the Facebook feed. All right, sorry, Ryan's interrupted me. Tell me that there's a big echo on the Facebook feed. Okay, where was I? I hate those interruptions. Not to you, Ryan. It just brain falling apart. Nope, everybody says it sounds good. Okay, good. So you've got a shutter speed of whatever you want. So now let's move to aperture. Aperture becomes a very creative decision for still photography. Your aperture can be really big. It could be like an f1.2 if you got a lens that fast, or an f2.8 or an f4 is going to be more common, down to something small like a f11, f16, f22. The smaller that aperture gets, the less light is coming through. So this is how you can restrict light coming into the scene. But as we all know, the side effect of this is the more we stop it down, the shallower, the larger the depth of field. The bigger, the wider open it is, the shallower depth of field, meaning how much is in focus. If we want to take a portrait photo, you want to have a picture of a person, you probably want the background to be relatively out of focus. That requires a larger aperture. So that large aperture to get that shallow depth of field is letting a lot of light in, which for still photography is going to mean needing a faster shutter speed. Okay, so that's fine. So for still photography, in a full sunny day, we open it wide up, we get that shallow depth of field, we go to a 2000th, 4000th, 8000th of a second, we get the exposure that we need, and boom, you're happy, you're good. But now let's switch over to video. When you're shooting video, you don't have the same control over your shutter speed. Now, I shouldn't say that you don't have it. You can do it. You can take your shutter speed really, really high, but what happens is you end up with a video stream, a video feed that doesn't look quite right. It has this very staccato look to it. We've actually talked about this before when we talked about shutter angle versus shutter speed. We'll link to that video up here. We had a whole discussion about it, and I showed some examples of high shutter speed or shutter angle versus kind of normal shutter speed or shutter angle for video. In general, this is not a hard, fast rule, but this is kind of the baseline that to which we all start with. In general, you want your shutter speed for video, just forget shutter angle for a moment. You want your shutter speed for video to be half of the frame rate. So if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, which is pretty normal, in North America, 30 frames per second is normal. In Europe, 25 frames per second is normal. You want a shutter speed that is 60th of a second or 50th of a second. So let's just stick with NTSC. 30 frames per second video, you want a 60th of a second shutter speed. That's generally what we want. Okay, so if I shoot wide open at f1.228 or something, my shutter speed for a still has to be 4,000ths of a second. Well, that's nowhere near that 60th of a second. And if I want to shoot at that ideal 60th of a second, there's no way that I can shoot wide open at f2.8 or whatever it might be. It's way too much light. So now I have to restrict the amount of light coming into the lens. If I want to shoot wide open when shooting video, I need to shoot with a neutral density filter, something that will restrict the amount of light coming through the lens. Back to still photography, a place where it becomes very handy is if you want to do a long exposure. Let's say you're shooting something like a waterfall. So here's a couple of very simple, not very exciting, but simple little photos of waterfalls, rushing rivers. We have the beautiful motion blur of the water. That is because I was able to shoot at a long exposure. It might have been a 30th or a 15th or multiple, 1 second, 2 seconds, whatever. Long exposures. Going back to that full daylight or even in the shade like these photos were, you want to shooting at that low ISO. That's going to be your advantage anyway. You're probably not going to want to restrict the aperture too much, but you could a little bit. You're not trying to go for that super shallow depth of field, but maybe bring it down to like 5.6, f8 or something. And now you're shooting at a shutter speed of, let's say, 2/50th of a second. Well, that's pretty much going to freeze the water. If you want to have that 30th, that quarter of a second, that 1 second, 2 second, 5 second exposure, you need to reduce the amount of light in. So again, neutral density. So those are two very common uses of neutral density. On still photography, to force a long exposure so that you can have the rushing water type of a thing, that movement that you want in there. And on video, it's so that you can keep a shutter speed or shutter angle, if you're shooting shutter angle, that is optimum. So you have that shutter angle of 180 degrees or the shutter speed, if you're shooting in 30p, of a 60th of a second. This allows you that control. So the trifecta of exposures may not get you to where you want to be when you want to be on that lower end of shutter speed when you're out in full sun. So that's where these things come into play. Okay, so when you go to buy these things, there's two different ways you can buy them. You can buy a single ND filter that is a specific stop. It is a 1-stop ND, a 2-stop ND, a 4-stop ND. This is reducing that much light in stops, measured in stops, from what's coming into the camera. And remember, every stop is either doubling or half of the amount of light, depending on which way you're going. So that's great, but they're not very flexible. Now, for still photography, they're probably fine, especially if you're doing something like a waterfall, because if you've got a bag of these things, you can go, okay, let's try the 2-stop, look at, not quite the right, take it off, put the 4-stop on, there we go, there's the exposure that I want, cool. But when you're shooting video, you can't be doing that. When you're shooting video, you need to be a bit more flexible. And even shooting stills, it's obviously convenient to be flexible. And the flexibility comes in something called a variable ND. Now, variable ND generally goes from like 2 to 6 or 2 to 8 stops. This one doesn't say on it. Of course it doesn't, but I think it was 2 to 6 or 2 to 8. We'll link to these down below. I want to say 2 to 8 on these. They're pretty good. And it's like a polarizing filter. You just turn it to change the amount of light coming through. So how does that work? Well, on a very, very simplified level, it is 2 pieces of glass. Imagine, if you will, and this is obviously not exactly how it works, but it's basically, imagine, if you will, you were looking through 2 screens. You had 2 screens, not hash screens, but 2 just vertical line screens, 2 of them like this. When they held up like this, lined up with each other, the most light's going to come through. As I start to rotate these, it's restricting the light. The holes are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, allowing less and less light through. That's effectively what's happening. It's just on a light wavelength level. So by rotating them against each other, you're restricting the amount of light comes through. This is why when you get to a bigger one like these, with a really wide range, you can imagine, if you think of it like those holes are going to get really small, and by the time they line up perfectly, the holes might be almost too small. And what you'll often find, and I do find on these, is if you go too close to the max, and usually once you hit max, or maybe even a little bit before that, certainly if you go after, once those things line up completely, you actually don't get anything coming through. It's just basically completely dark. That is also where you're likely to see distortion, some weird coloring happening. You'll see it as soon as you look through a camera with a filter on and you start rotating it down. It'll very quickly go from darker, 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 blah. It just suddenly goes to heck. So that's just one of those things that happens on these filters that do that really wide range. So that's everything you need to do. We're going to go outside in a moment. Before I do that, I want to remind you of the way that we operate here on the show. We operate on something called a value for value proposition. What that means is, if you feel like you have taken value from today's show, then we would most certainly appreciate if you could put a little bit of value back in. Head over to PhotoJoseph.com/support, and you can see all the different ways to provide value there. We have membership on the website, PhotoJoseph.com, which includes, by the way, the Business of the Business interviews. The second one is finally getting uploaded today. Had some issues with the audio editing on that, but that's done. Third interview has been shot, and I will be editing that over the next few days or week or so, and we'll get that online ASAP. So PhotoJoseph.com/support, and remember, if you do decide to buy these filters, I would most certainly appreciate it if you use the affiliate links that are down below, or you can get to them from that support page as well. All right, but that's it. Let's go outside. Ryan, coming out. Let's go outside and let's do ourselves a live demo, shall we? I'm going to need the ND filter, and don't forget to talk about these when I get back. And I guess that's it. Let's do this. Alrighty, greetings everybody. We are outside and the big fans are going. Hopefully it's not too loud for you. And let's just take a look through the camera and see what I've got here. So currently set up, let's see, let me focus on Ryan. I'm shooting with the Nocticron lens. I'm at f1.2, ISO 400. Let's start with that. So I'm gonna make sure my ISO is low at 400, good. And I'm shooting at f1.2, but look at the shutter speed, 16,000. I hit the wrong button. 16 thousandths of a second. That's really, really fast. So that's not gonna work too well for video, is it? Now, with this combination, let me go back in here and let's go back to this. Take a look through here. If I stop this down, say I take it down to like F9, we're at 1600th of a second. Let's keep going down. F16, 500th of a second. So we're getting a lot more depth of field. Let's get, there we go. There's our depth of field preview. You're getting a lot more depth of field in there. Definitely not good. If I bring this back up to 1.2, I get that nice shallow bokeh on there. You can see where the shutter speed is. So that's where we're at right now. So that's, fine for still photography. I have a portrait. Obviously, it's not going to get me what I want if I'm shooting a waterfall, but not any good for video. So let me switch this over to video mode, and we're going to see where we run into a wall and we simply cannot get the exposure right for video. So let's go back to looking through the camera in here. And all right, I'm going to actually start at an ideal shutter angle of 180 degree. and let's see if I can even get the exposure right. So I'm stopping this all the way down to f16. So at ISO 400, I can even take it down to 200. So 200, 180 degree shutter, f16, still overexposed. Let me take the shutter angle down a little bit more, about 90 degree shutter. So there I can finally get the exposure, but it's not right. That's not what I want, right? I've got all that depth of field, see all the crud in the background. Definitely not what I want. So if I go back to trying to shoot this thing at an f1.2 aperture, well, clearly it's way overexposed, and obviously if I bring my shutter angle to 180 degrees, we're completely, totally blown out. So that's not gonna work. So now we need the variable ND. So let's see if I can do this without actually dropping it like I almost did earlier today. Super, there we go. I'm going to start this thing at the minimum setting. So find my dot, there it is, set that to the minimum setting. And let's take a look through here and see what we've got. So at the minimum setting, we are still really, really overexposed. But as I start to dial it down, and notice the camera settings are not changing. We're still at f1.2, still at 180 degree, still at ISO 200. But now I can bring it down and get the exposure right, and there we go. So now I've got my wide open shot with the Nocticron in full daylight while shooting video. That's pretty cool. That is what the ND filter does for us when shooting video. It allows us to shoot with whatever aperture we want at the proper shutter angle or shutter speed at a reasonable ISO and get the shot that we want. All right, let's head back inside. Alrighty, so what do you guys think? Pretty cool, right? It's really interesting to see that thing working live like that. I know I could have just shown you a bunch of pre-shot videos, but I thought I'm going to show it to you in real time. I think it'll be a bit more effective. So hopefully that was clear. All right, so the last thing that I want to mention to you when you're going to buy these is it's easy to look at these and go, well, even the cheap ones, they might end up being a little bit expensive if I realize that I have a bunch of different lenses with a bunch of different filter sizes on them. Well, here's the way you get around that. You buy one for the biggest lens that you have. And the only reason that I have two here is because the one out there that I just put onto the Nocticron was the biggest lens that I had, and then I decided I needed one for another lens that was actually bigger, so I had to buy another one. But you buy one, and then you buy step-down rings. So this is a series of step-down rings. This stack, while it looks a little bit, maybe a little bit silly here, it's going this little bit silly, this huge stack of rings in here. This stack of rings, you can see each one of these goes from, like that second one goes from 52 to 55, and that's going to go from 55, let's see, where is it? Thread that around there somewhere. There you go, it goes 55 to 58, and then that's plugged into one that goes from 58 to 62, then 62 to 67, and so on and so on and so on. So you end up with a stack of these that you then put your, is this the right one? Yeah, there we go, that you can then put on there. So now you've got, there you go, right? Ta-da. The kind of cool thing about this also acts as a bit of a lens shade. I can't argue with that. A lens shade is always a good thing. And the reason this is notable is because once you put this filter on, even if you don't have any adapter rings, odds are you're not going to be able to use your lens shade. Your lens shade would screw into the camera or mount onto the front of the lens rather, and that would block any filter that you put on there. So you need to be able to move this. It's kind of hard to do when there is a lens shade covering it. So just one of those things to consider as well. Remember, you're probably not going to be able to use your lens shade, but if you do something like this, then you kind of get a little bit of a built-in lens shade on there. Now, light could still hit the glass here, but it's better than it hitting the front lens, and it's probably not going to be a problem anyway. Anyway, so there you go. That, my friends, is that. So I hope that was interesting and educational and informational, or something like that. Anyway, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the bell, all that good stuff. We're going to jump into the Q&A. If you're watching the show live, participate in the Q&A. If you're not watching live, you can watch the Q&A later and ask any questions you want in the comments. We will be right back. Good morning and welcome back to PhotoJoseph's Photo Moment, the Q&A portion of the show. We have just done a show about variable ND filters, explaining what they are, why you need them, how they work, and so on. If you missed the show, click right here to watch that and then come back to the Q&A. This is the live Q&A, which means if you have a Q, I will do my best to A it, and if you are participating in the live chat, then you want to put @PhotoJoseph in front of it. I did a Q&A at the end of the Lumix S presentation yesterday, and a bunch of people were posting questions without doing that because I realized I had a bunch of people who weren't regulars to the show and they didn't know that, so a lot of questions got missed. But do your best to put PhotoJoseph in front of it. If you've already posted the question earlier and you didn't do that, just copy and paste it in again with the @PhotoJoseph on there. And let's see what we've got here. So I'm scrolling up through, we're starting the beginning. And why you need 20 different ones, I have no idea what that's a reference to. But John, you're welcome to rephrase that question. Double asterisk is saying, check out filters from Breakthrough Photography. Excellent, thank you for the recommendation. Yeah, I'm not married to these filters. I'm just telling you that this brand, the Fotga ones, I'm just saying that I've used them. They haven't sent me, I've bought every single one of them that I have, and they've been very good to me. And they're really inexpensive. So, it's kind of hard to argue with cheap and good, but there are obviously better ones out there. So yeah, do absolutely check out the Breakthrough Photography ones. John Roberts says, I've had some good luck with the Nissi brand, N-I-S-I, Nissi brand as well, with no color cast. Excellent, love it. More brand recommendations. Thank you very much. Christopher Pepe says, I've had problems with the variable NDs having internal reflections while panning in video. Oh, the best results I've had came from using single NDs, 0.3 to 1.2, and not stacking them. Interesting. So yeah, with a non-variable ND, you can stack them, right? Forgetting the reflections issue right now, you can stack them. So if you've got a 1 and a 2, you can stack them together, make a 3. At least I think that's how the math works. Yeah, you make a 3-stop ND. You can totally do that, but there is a risk, apparently, according to Christopher Pepe, that you can get reflections, and that makes sense, right? So any piece of glass on your camera, in the lens itself or outside of the lens, risks creating reflections. And what often happens, the way that these often occur, is not actually a glare off of the front of the filter. It's a glare off of the light coming through the filter, through the lenses, hitting the sensor, bouncing off the sensor, passing back through the lenses, and then hitting the back of your filter. And if the back of your filter doesn't have the right coatings on it, then that will bounce right back again, creating a reflection or an echo in the scene. So you want to make sure that your filters are coated. Now, honestly, I can't say that these are marketed as coated, these cheaper Fotga ones. But like I said, I haven't had any problems with them. So, but good to know. Christopher has run into those. It is certainly something to watch out for with the variables. But there you go. So just something to keep in mind on as well. Killian saying just use a sun HUD should solve the problem. But as I mentioned at the end of the main video, it can be hard to attach a sunshade. Now, not impossible, right? Like this particular filter, this one, what is this? This is a 77 millimeter. It fits on a 77 millimeter filter. It has front filters on it. So if we go in here, front filter threads on it. You can see, you can kind of see that, but there are front filter threads in here. So if I had a screw-on lens hood for that size, I could attach that onto there and I would still be able to rotate it. It would actually make it even easier to rotate because I'd have the whole shade to grab onto instead of just this thin ring in here. However, it would have to be the right size, and that's not going to be 77 because that's the inside one. It's probably like an 82 or something. I don't know. It doesn't actually say on here. Maybe it said it on the box, but you'd have to get that as a separate thing. And not all variable ND filters, or any filter for that matter, have filter threads on the inside of it. Not all of them are designed to be stacked with something else. So just keep that in mind when you're shopping. Alrighty, let's see here. Scrolling. Here we go. Burns text is way off topic, but where did you source your intro music from? That set came from, hold on, no, Artlist is what I use for a lot of my music. Artlist is awesome for music for the vlogs. If you're watching the show before it starts, music that's playing in there is just music that I pulled from Artlist. But no, that was not. I have to check the website because I know, I always forget the name of it. It is Audio Jungle. If you go to Envato, ENVATO.com, that's a licensing site for a bunch of different types of stuff. And you go to the music one, it is Audio Jungle, and they have a bunch of different stingers on there. What's really cool is you often get stinger packs where you'll have a 5-second, a 7-second, a 11-second, a 15-second version of the same tune. So that's what I use for the intro. And if you've ever watched the non-live version of this show, you may have noticed that the intro for the main show is the 11-second, I think it's 11-second or 7-second version, whatever it is. And then the Q&A, I always replace it with the shorter version. It's the 5 or 7 or whatever, shorter version of it. So it sounds the same. It's the same jingle, but it's got a shorter version of it. And those all came from Envato. So yeah, it's cool. I like it. I don't have any affiliate or any codes or anything, but just head to envato.com or Audio Jungle, and you'll just Google Audio Jungle and you'll find it. Tony Smith, what are your recommendations for a more budget-friendly variable ND? That is definitely going to be the ones in my hand here, the Fotga, F-O-T-G-A. Again, scroll down, links down below to these things. they're very inexpensive, and they've treated me very well in the past, so I've never had a problem with it. John Roberts says, why you need 20 different ND filters, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Yeah, you need all those different ones unless you're going to do get the variable. But again, differences, trade-offs. I would say most likely, and I think that Christopher Pepe was saying this earlier, better quality with the non-variables, but I only own variables. I don't own any fixed ones, and I've never had a complaint with them. Then again, you know, it's not like if I shot waterfalls for a living, then I would probably invest in some really high quality non-variable ND filters, but I don't, and so this has been good for me. John Roberts, boom, just explained it perfectly why you can get reflections or ghosting with filters. There you go. The reflection, the bouncing back, the echo coming back off of the sensor. Bernardo Silva, hey dude, that's me. Don't you ever get issues with variable NDs on photos and the cross pattern? Only if you crank it up too high. If you take it all the way up to the end, then you see it. But otherwise, no. I've never seen an issue. No. And to be fair, with these cheaper filters, I am mostly doing video work. I don't do that many long exposure stills. I showed you a couple of them, and actually I was like, where am I gonna find some? I shoot more long exposure stills with my iPhone using the, I've shown you that before. I'll link to that video too. If you wanna know how to do long exposure still photos, like waterfall type photos, same kind of thing with your iPhone, did a whole video on that. It's so crazy cool. It's amazing. All right. Infogera says, is the quality of an ND filter notable in the picture or video? If it is a cheap, and by cheap I don't mean low cost, but cheap quality filter, then yes. We talked about that at the opening of the show. You can get a color cast, usually towards blue or towards brown. I've even seen them towards green. That can happen, but a really good filter will have no color cast. It's supposed to be neutral. That's in the name, neutral. Some cheaper ones will give you a color cast. The Fotga ones that I'm using, I've not done a side-by-side like without to exactly check the colors, but I have never had an issue or felt like I had an issue with color cast. Again, until you get to the very extreme end where it's unusable anyway, but then you get all kinds of other weird stuff happening too. So no, it should not be a problem. John Roberts says, yeah, I find that to be a problem more with inexpensive variable NDs, where you can get that X going through the frame. Okay, so there you go. The interesting, inexpensive ones, I haven't had that problem with these, but there you go. I guess good shout out for the Fotga brand. Alrighty, everybody, I think that is everything for today. So thanks so much for tuning in live. Not a single Lumix S question. I am shocked. If you missed the announcement on the Lumix S, yes, it's true. Panasonic has announced a Lumix full-frame camera, the S1 and the S1R. We did a whole thing about that yesterday, super early in the morning at 4:15 a.m. I was here in the studio broadcasting. I was here to actually watch the presentation from Photokina at 3:30 in the a.m. And that whole thing, we'll link to it right here. That was a nice video talking about all the new stuff, at least everything that is public, and answer some questions. Alrighty, Burns asking, when do you get a Lumix S? There you go. Yeah, I don't know, man. All I know the same thing you do, early 2019, that's it, that's all I know. I obviously hope that I will have one before the public does. I can't say for sure that I will, but that has been, historically, I've usually gotten a camera a little bit early, so let's keep all of our fingers crossed that I will. All right, guys, thank you very much. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.